Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have to say the great discussions yesterday evening are taking their toll on attendance, but we don't want to penalize people who are on time, such as yourselves, so we'd rather get started. My name is Maximilian Martin. I run the Philanthropy Services Unit at UBS, and I think we have an exciting program this morning because we're trying to look into one of the most important tensions, I think, in any kind of organization, but in particular in the social enterprise movement, which is, on the one hand, getting creative people into the equation, empowering them, getting them to do great things. And we're lucky to have Bill Drayton from Ashoka with us this morning, who, of course, is really the pioneer and probably the standard bearer in this respect. And on the other hand, the need to deliver solutions in scale, and this, of course, requiring some kind of accountability, control mechanisms, things that sound a bit less fun, perhaps, but are equally important if we want to build resilient institutions. Our friends at Skoll, whom I'd like to thank us for the invitation to design this session, they've put this into an evergreen session. I think it is really an evergreen, and that's why it needs to be treated with the appropriate care. At the same time, it is a slightly different twist on leadership. Because, of course, if you think about how do you get all of this right, how do you get the creative people to do their work and then also go along and build institutions, that's not so trivial. And leadership is probably the important piece to get right here. We have now, I think, about 85 minutes. The plan is the following. I will briefly introduce our speakers in the order in which they speak. We have a great panel this morning. Then I will provide a framework on how we should think about leadership, because if we want to get it right, I think we might as well have our definitions clear. And then we will hear from our panelists, their perspectives, their experiences on how they manage to be effective leaders and attend both to the need for creativity and control, and getting execution right at the end of the day. And then, of course, we're delighted to discuss with all of you. That's a tall order. We have a lot we want to achieve in a short amount of time. Fortunately, we're helped by PowerPoint and all of you, and being disciplined. I've been asked also to read out a housekeeping note. Certain commandments. Number one, please turn off your mobile phones. I'm sure we can all accomplish that. Second, we will have a Q&A. That's the good news. But of course, it also not just requires asking questions, but also please stating them as loudly as possible, because you are being recorded. So we might as well smile. At the conclusion of the session, we need to vacate the room quickly with all belongings so that staff can prepare for the next session. And our friends at Skoll ask us to then take the conversations, which we're hopefully sparking, out into the hall. And there will be a survey about the forum next week, which will be sent to you. And our friends at Skoll have asked me to also reiterate how important it is to fill it in, because feedback is, of course, always essential to improve the quality of the forum every year. And that said, I mean, I've been involved with the forum since the beginning. I've attended every one of them. I'm speaking regularly. I have to say it's really wonderful to see how much it's grown, this community. So let's see what we can do with it here. Let me just introduce our speakers real quick. Well, I think I'm helped by the fact that Bill Drayton needs no introduction, basically. But let me nevertheless say he's the founder and CEO of Ashoka, the largest global network of social entrepreneurs. He started the organization in 1980 and is in many ways, I think we can say, the founding father of social entrepreneurship. I don't know, Bill, if you enjoy being called like that, it implies a certain age, but I mean, I think the gravitas piece we can certainly agree on. Today, Ashoka supports over 1,800 social entrepreneurs worldwide, and last year elected 144 new ones. He knows a lot about innovation and social entrepreneurs. That's something that we know. But also, we're delighted, Bill, to have you because you know a lot about leadership. As a student at Harvard, Oxford, and Yale Law School already, he was active in civil rights, founded a number of organizations such as Harvard's Ashoka Table, which was an interdisciplinary weekly forum in the social sciences. In 2005, he was selected as one of America's best leaders by US News and World Report and the Center for Public Leadership at the Kennedy School. He's also the chair of Youth Venture, Community Greens, Get America Working, He's won numerous awards and honors throughout the career, and I have to say, if I tried to even summarize all his accomplishments, there wouldn't be any time for discussion, so I will just desist. But let me say one thing. I fully agree with Bill Clinton, who suggested in 2007 that Bill deserves the Nobel Prize. So let's see when we will be able to celebrate all of that. Interestingly, Bill's plans for leadership go far beyond himself, because one of the things that I've taken away from our interaction with our friends at Ashoka is that, Bill, you have the view of everyone a change maker, and that's a fundamentally empowering view on leadership, because we can all be leaders in that sense and change makers. And I'm sure we'll learn a bit more about the initiative here. It's very hard to get hold of Bill because he's so much in demand, so we're pleased and privileged to have you here, so thanks for joining us. I'm pleased to also then introduce someone who I think was able to scale, Estella, your work partially as a result of Bill's work, because Estella Villarreal Junco, sitting just next to Bill, is the founder of Unidos Lograremos in Mexico and an Ashoka Fellow. She's been championing the cause of social inclusion for over 20 years and works on changing the way in which disability is perceived and acted upon. I'm especially pleased, Estella, to have you with us as well, because we know you very well. You were a finalist in the US Ashoka Visionaries Social Entrepreneurship Awards in Mexico in 2006, and I can fully attest to your passion to create change. It's a pleasure to hear from you how you manage this challenge of being creative, at the same time creating an effective organization and being a leader. Estella has expanded her model to many cities in Mexico. Today, Unidos is present in 10 out of 31 Mexican states and has reached 540,000 people, belonging, which is also important, I think, to different economic, social, and ethnic groups. And for our untiring efforts, also has received numerous awards. And again, I'll be very brutal here and just thank you for being here rather than summarizing all of your accomplishments. We will stay in the region, just moving one chair further, and one country which is not exactly next door, but sort of in the neighborhood. And I'd like to introduce someone else from this hotbed of social innovation, which is Latin America, with a different background. You know, many social entrepreneurs struggle with scale. We all know how hard it is to build a large organization in civil society. Samuel Azout is, I think, able to provide a very interesting perspective here because of his prior experience of running a large business operation where he oversaw over 12,000 people. Samuel is currently a founder and chairman of Fundaction Futbol con Corazon, which is an NGO dedicated to improving life opportunities for children and young adults, creating safe and peaceful neighborhoods in Colombia through sports. And before that, before becoming a social entrepreneur, he was CEO of Carulla Vivero, the largest supermarket chain in Colombia. He's not only chairman of his own foundation, but also an active supporter of other organizations dedicated to social inclusion and economic empowerment, for example, Fundación Carulla, Fundación Colombia, and also serves on the board of Fundación Pies Descalzos, which you have probably heard of, started by the Colombian singer and celebrity Shakira. Sami, it's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. It's fantastic. We've also known each other in the past, and I hope you'll join us again in Cancun at our upcoming forum. I'm especially delighted because we have, as you can see, a very diverse panel here with different perspectives on what does it really take to be an effective leader and navigate this tension. We will now add another twist to it, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jillian Caldwell from One Sky. You know, one of the big challenges that many social entrepreneurs face is transition, right? I mean, once you've built an organization that is fundamentally built on charisma, how do you then hand it over to the next group of leaders? That's not trivial. You've accomplished that, so I'm sure we'll hear more about that. And you've chosen through One Sky to work on a very important challenge that we're all facing as humanity, climate change. You're working on a new national campaign in the US that advocates for bold federal action on global warming. You're a filmmaker and an attorney, which I think puts you in a good position for being taped and recorded this morning. I think it's very exciting to have you with us because ultimately, I think we all agree, if we want to move things in scale, we need to build effective and accountable organizations, but we also need to influence public policy. I'm sure Jillian can help us understand that. She also knows a lot about something that came up in the panel, in the opening panel yesterday. It's useful to have a celebrity. You've worked with celebrities in your previous work, specifically with Peter Gabriel, when you were running Witness, focusing on documenting human rights abuses. You've worked with Angelina Jolie as well, who supported the organization and has traveled with you. And in fact, you have had a remarkable career, really remarkable input to moving the needle in this space, exposing human rights abuses. You've led an international investigation into trafficking women and the sex trade. So I think, we know that you're not afraid of going into difficult issues, and let's face it, this topic this morning is a challenging one, but we need to get it right, because otherwise we will have a lot of charisma, a lot of good ideas, but we will fail in the execution. So I think, please give our speakers a hand here. We have a great panel. The nice thing about having a great panel is that as a moderator, you hardly have to do anything, which is great. But I would like to nevertheless, so that we start from a common understanding, share a few points on leadership, how we can think about it, so that we're all on the same page, literally. I think we all agree that there are many different views on what leadership is or should be. We're not going to resolve all of that here in a session. That would be impossible. But I think we agree that change can't be achieved without a powerful message or vision, and that message often has to be delivered and embodied by people who exert a larger disproportionate impact. I mean, that's really leadership. Leadership is about influencing very complex, interactive, often intangible processes, and moving groups or institutions from one mode of interacting or being and acting to another. And that's hard. Interestingly, if you group all of the leadership literature, if you're, again, brutal and try to make it simple, there are three kinds of views on what constitutes an effective leadership strategy. The first is epic leadership. I mean, I've put them in a pyramid so you can see them. I think instinctively, that's what we all think about when we think about leaders. I mean, people who have great charisma, who can, more normal people like us, so to speak, you can get them moving, to do things that we couldn't do otherwise. That sounds good in a way, but the problem is, and it's easy to understand, but the problem is leadership isn't just about the characteristics of some people who are high up there. I mean, Alexander the Great didn't go over the Hellespont alone, for example. There were a few people with him, otherwise he wouldn't have accomplished anything. So this is clearly part of the solution, the charisma, the catalytic work of the great leader, but it's hardly all of the solution. Now, a second view on leadership focuses more on, in a sense, the leader almost as a faceless architect of structures, of systems. This is what we see in business most of the time. Setting up institutions, incentive systems that reward behavior, alignment of behavior through an organizational pyramid. That's what engineering leadership is all about. We see that a lot in the private sector. Doesn't always work. I think we've seen that especially over the past year and a half, and are suffering from some of the consequences. But I think we all agree that getting incentives right, building systems is very powerful, influencing and aligning human behavior. And in fact, industrialization, our lifestyle today would not have been possible without such leadership. Businesses have become a lot more formal over the past 150 years. This has really allowed specialization, economies of scale, economies of scope, and this is probably best embodied by people like Frederick Winslow Taylor and scientific management. Again, this makes sense, right? We need systems to align behavior, but again, it can't be the entire answer. Because, people we're not just robotons, we're not automatons, fortunately. And there's a third strategy of leadership, which I think resonates a lot with this movement here, with social enterprise. And that's the logic of what I would call enlightenment leadership. The idea that everyone, as Bill would say, everyone can be a change maker, that, you know, leadership is not something that is just exercised by some people at some kind of top of a pyramid, be it a military leader or a business leader or a politician, or that it is hard-coded in some kind of incentive systems and structures. But really, that's an empowering message. Leadership is something in all of us. And I think we've seen over the centuries how powerful social movements are and can be, and that this statement is fundamentally true. I mean, people lead their environment, they lead at all levels of an organization, sometimes more, sometimes less. But the problem is this alone also doesn't get us anywhere, because it's great if we all lead, but at the end of the day, we need institutions, because once we can no longer lead for biological reasons, for example, or because we want to do something else, I mean, here's the topic of serial social entrepreneurship, for example, well, then, you know, what remains? So we need to build institutions as well. What we want to do this morning is to really understand what kind of leadership strategy has been particularly effective with our social entrepreneurs here on the panel, who are all extremely accomplished and who know a thing or two about how to get it right, and how they in particular navigate this tension. Because everyone here has started with a great idea, and multiple great ideas. It was very creative, and then started to build institutions. The institutions you represent are different stages of the life cycle. I think that makes it particularly interesting and brings me to my last slide before we can go into the discussion. Clearly, when we think about getting the control piece right, I mean, it would be unreasonable to expect the same kind of approach from a startup, which can still be run fundamentally by charisma, than from a mature organization, which may be active, say, in over 50 countries, has thousands of members or employees. It requires different kinds of ways of aligning behavior through the engineering part, so to speak. So as we hear from our panelists, and preparing for the Q&A, you might also already start thinking, reflecting on your own experience, what has worked for you, because the good news is we have planned for an extensive Q&A. We want to have about 20, 30 minutes with you. And we realize this is a challenging topic because it's intersecting, you know, leadership, creativity, control. All of these are big topics. We couldn't possibly deal with them comprehensively in an hour and a half. But we nevertheless want to take a stab at it because we feel it's important to the future of this movement, to the future of your organizations. And the good news is, I think we're being helped this morning in our discovery process with our panel. And I'd like to introduce or invite Phil to share his opening views. Bill, what's your experience? What has worked for you? How have you managed to get the balance right? Thank you.
I spent 10 years at McKinsey and love this set of issues. I have to fess that up to you right away. What I'm going to try and do is not only deal with specific architecture issues, but argue that we're going through the most fundamental change in society, and therefore in the nature of what's needed of each of us individually and of organizations. And if you don't understand that, we're going to be confused talking about two different types of organization. And I've been helped enormously in understanding this because over the last several months, several young friends have caused me to watch a number of films about dinosaurs. And specifically, about a month ago, I had this fascinating 2-hour film about the transition dinosaur birds. And there were little mammals scurrying around trying to avoid these rather large and not very beautiful animals. And I think that's where we are. The people in this room at this conference are the mammals, and we represent a very, very different world than that of the dinosaurs, which are loudly crashing around us. And so what is the history that we're dealing with here? Agricultural revolution, small surplus, only a few people could play. So we've had 10,000 years of elites running everything. the momentum, the thought process, the organizational structures of that world are very deep. The conventional concept of management is a few people manage everyone else. And by the way, that's why you come to business school in part, because of the implied promise that you get to be one of those few people who gets to manage everyone else. Well, that is absolutely a dead life form. Is about 3 centuries ago, we broke the control of the elites, starting with business, and then 30 years ago with our sector, the citizen sector, we said, anyone with a better idea, if you implement it, we're going to make you real happy and we're going to copy you. And that has generated an explosion of productivity. We've grown the surplus, so in fact, everyone can be a change maker. And we've also accelerated the rate of change. And actually, this was a meeting that I learned this, that Max organized in Italy. This guy came and he kept showing all these slides, and what they showed one after another was that the rate at which change is accelerating is logarithmic. It doesn't matter what country, what sector, the curve is logarithmic. And it's not just the rate of change, but change is coming at us from every possible dimension and combination of dimensions, as there are more and more and more individuals and groups who are creating things, who are more and more wired together. So innovation spread further, faster. Now, in that environment, the dinosaur of a few people running everything can't function. What we have to have instead is a world of teams. And you all know what this is like from whether it's cricket or basketball or whatever. You know, you get the ball and then you've got to do something with it. And that's very exciting. But you're always doing it with the team in mind. Now, what's happening is that we're living in a world of teams, and literally a world of teams. The boundaries become less and less clear, because the nature of being productive is that we work with others wherever the need is. You know, that's the web is part of the nervous and circulatory system that's developing. So we as individuals have to have an extraordinary set of skills to be a part of this ballet. We have to have mastery of very sophisticated empathy, teamwork, leadership, change-making, all of which are social skills, all of which have to be learned. Now, this world of a team of teams will work for the good for a very simple reason, and that is that you can't even get into this game unless you're good at empathy. You just don't have the skills. Anyone who does not master empathy is out of the game, because you're going to hurt people and disrupt institutions no matter what technical knowledge you have. And you can't fake it. This is the fundamental skill. Well, you know, empathy is sort of that's the skill, but it also is who you are. So now this is a very, very different model, and but it works. And so, if I may, oh, there they are. Ah, they're already up there. The Jesuits, these two men, Loyola and Xavier, created an extraordinary institution of everyone a change maker, and for 450 years it has functioned very successfully all across the globe as an integrated institution. Now, how many citizen groups or businesses or anything else do you know who's accomplished that? And think about the people you know who are or once were Jesuits. They somehow let you know within the first 4 to 8 paragraphs that, oh, I was a Jesuit. And you see people who are Jesuits all over the world. They're very remarkable people. Now, something about this organization is right. It attracts and it helps people be very powerful. You're supposed, as a Jesuit, to do the best you possibly can, and the expectations that you can are very high, both in works and faith. And the exercises, step back. Are you really accomplishing big things? Or are you being drawn down into the muck of daily behavior? And are you doing it in love? Well, that's a very strong statement of a system based on empathetic skills. So to use a much less good word, but analytically useful. Now think about Google and Silicon Valley and compare it to Detroit and Milwaukee and so on. And what do you have that's working there? It's a collection of people who are change makers, who like doing change, who feel they can do change, and they work together in and across organizational lines. And they're inventing ways of doing that. Same thing is true with Bangalore versus Calcutta. Now, you stop and think about it, it's very clear what works and what doesn't work. We know who the mammals are and who the dinosaurs are. Now, we were asked to share a little bit about our own struggles here. Ashoka has to be, absolutely has to be in everyone, an entrepreneur organization. And defining it broadly. The 2,600 fellows and members, the staff, the support networks, the entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs who are partners, are many other partners. You know, Skoll, Said. It's an intentionally open architecture. Change makers is another part of that. So that's part of the architecture right from the beginning. We try to draw people in very carefully, both as fellows and staff who are mammals, who are entrepreneurs, who have very strong ethical fiber. We take that very seriously. Then we try to create an environment that is fitted for this type of person. So you can choose as staff to have 100% comp time, which means basically for people who like what they're doing, they can take time whenever they want, which is appropriate for someone who's an entrepreneur. You want to start your own idea, as long as it meets a high standard, you don't have to move your desk. You can just do that within. We're building processes that are, you know, a democratic system is actually very sophisticated. It's much more sophisticated than the earlier organizational form. So we've developed processes that give people the power to be powerful, to make major historic contributions that really work and that draw out the strength of the community. So you elect fellows, the best entrepreneurs we can find, regardless of subject. You got a couple of hundred, you see a pattern in a field. Okay, this field is ripe. 200 people have bet their lives that they can change this field. All right, so what are the patterns that you can see? And once you start seeing the patterns, which are the 1, 2, 3 that are really historic for the field and for moving the world from small elites to everyone a change maker, that are also a big win for the key people in the field, and that we can see the force that will move society there. Once you get that, then we start something that's really very new in the world, and we're frankly still learning how to do this, but we're far along in a couple of cases, which is working together, collaborative entrepreneurship, to tip the world with those principles. So any child that doesn't master empathy is out of the game. They're just going to be marginalized, and that will increase rapidly. So schools don't think about that. We'd like to change that. If we can get 2 to 3% of the influential schools in 7 to 10 countries, we can tip the world. We have to get some of the key intellectual leaders in those countries as well. Well, working together, we know who those people are, we know those institutions, we know how to work this, so we can do that. Now, this is a very new thing, but in terms of building an institution, this is a process that brings us together, doing what we like to do, which is cause change, which is exactly what the historical moment requires. And so that's part of the architecture as well. The final point is this: when I was trying to understand the Jesuits earlier, a former Jesuit, I was, of course, my McKinsey background, I was looking at organizational forms and whatnot, and said, oh, you've left something out, it's faith. Yes, that seemed like a pretty basic point. Well, every organization that's really viable has to know what it's doing, what its vision is. And for us, it's building an everyone a change-maker world. It's ending the rule of the elites. And that is this is the biggest change in history since the agricultural revolution. It's very motivating. All right, so now that's what works. I've had to be brief on that. Let me just raise a few risks. One big risk is the idea that safety is in stasis. No, absolutely wrong. The Fortune 500, where are they? If you look from those that were there 20 or 30 years ago, most of them are no longer in that list. But the Jesuits are doing very well, thank you. Now, what's the contrast? You build an organization where everyone is a brilliant change maker, and they are treated properly and have the right ways of working together, then you have a permanent organization. Stasis is where the risk is, not where the safety is. And I would add that we need to build organizations to look for the big changes, not the peripheral little ones. When you're after the next quarterly report, it's the little ones that you're after, but it's the institutions that are looking for the big S-curves changes that really are. Okay, another, this is one that really irritates me. I will fess up to you right away. And here you can hear the dinosaurs telling you what to do, which is, you know, right away, this is wrong. Oh, it's time for the entrepreneur to give way to the managers. And you hear the rhinoceros beat of the dinosaurs rushing at you. This is ridiculous. If you're causing major change, it's not having an idea and going and implementing it. It's a constant process of change. And the faster you go up that curve, the more that's true. You need to have everyone, not just one or two people managing you need everyone to be as much an entrepreneur as possible. That's what a successful organization is and increasingly will be. Bring in the managers, please. For those people here who are social investors, there is no safety in trying to control the modern mammalian organization. That is a really bad idea. The best, safest investment is when you invest in an everyone a change maker organization. That is the organization that will really bring results. And don't try to be a vehicle for bringing in, for example, this idea you got to have managers or you got to have this very old-fashioned evaluation, which is really backward-looking and control-oriented, not helpful. Finally, don't listen to dinosaurs. They keep telling you you can't. They tell you that individually. And they've also, you know, they want us to be like them. Well, it doesn't work. We're not like them, thank God. The only thing that's worse is marrying one. This really, really doesn't work. There is a fundamental, you know, Max mentioned the Alexander at the Hellespont. Well, think about Alexander in front of Persepolis. You know, here he was, very far away from main base, smaller army, and Darius had swept the plains, so there were no boulders that would upset his chariots and all these elephants. But at the end of the day, he was fleeing towards Afghanistan. And this was a confrontation basically between an army that was not good at phalanx fighting and one that was. It was an organizational change. Those rectangular porcupines that the Greeks had just made mincemeat of the Persians. Well, the phalanx is a very primitive form of organization compared to the team, let alone teams of teams. And you cannot put a phalanx spear carrier in a team. It doesn't work. This is a very rich ballet. You need a different set of skills. So we just have to understand that at every level, we're going through the most fundamental change in the nature of organization because the world is going through this fundamental change. And so please don't mix up mammals and dinosaurs when worrying about centrality or not. Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much for sharing this powerful vision. I think, marriages between mammals and dinosaurs, already from a space point of view, I wouldn't want to organize the wedding party, I guess. It might be hard. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. This is a powerful vision, I would say, at the meta level, at the Uber level, so to speak. The world is changing quickly. We need to think very carefully which of these changes matters, which are the big ones, and how we need to organize ourselves to confront them, to be able to use them productively. Let's now take a slightly different perspective and hear how does this actually work out at the level of a social entrepreneur of an organization. And I'm very pleased, Estella, that you've agreed to really take us a bit through your experience, because you started Unidos in 1987. And you've managed to build a very resilient organization that has touched over 500,000 people's lives. So help us understand what's worked for you and how does this relate perhaps to some of the things that Bill has exposed. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here. I remember an occasion when my family was in a park and another parent ordered his children to come back where my family was sitting. I remember as well that friend as a child who seemed uneasy coming to my house. The organization I represent, Unidos, was my solution to the rejection experiences by two of my siblings, both of whom are people with disabilities. In Mexico, a country with more than 10 million people with disabilities, discrimination and exclusion as everyday experiences. What Unidos try to do is integrate people without and with disabilities in social settings so that some changes can be made in the attitude of society. Unidos was started to help disabled people and evolve to educating people who are not disabled. It's a different kind of model. Rather than helping the suffering, we are trying to focus on those who something create the suffering. Over the last 22 years, I have experienced difficulties as a social entrepreneur, which I'm going to refer as a tension. By tensions, what I mean is conflicting forces that we need to manage and to administrate in our organization. I will talk about the type of leadership by looking at how my approach has changed over the 20 years. Okay. I still remember when I went to and visited my first donor 20 years ago. By this time, my family support was not sufficient. The question which I encountered was simply yet significant. Who do you represent? Simply an idea in a mind of a woman 20 years who wanted to change society was not sufficient to give me idea validity. Tension naturally arises between the solitary work of the social entrepreneur and the consensual work, a decision-making group, such a board of directors. Quite often, it becomes a body much more powerful than the singular entrepreneur. And accepting this is difficult for us. Our instinct is to share our dream, but share the decision-making is a more difficult step. My role in this type of leadership is more as visionary. Set the basis and involve 10 members that have higher predominance in engineering style. Sometimes this was difficult because I felt that I might lose control. An idea could be overpowered by the bureaucracy. With a board, I quickly realized that decision-making was now invested in another group in contrast to before, where I might do it myself over a cup of coffee while I took a shower. I remember the time when the president from our board of directors scolded me for not respecting board decisions. Quite rightly, he said, the advisory board served no value if I continued to make decisions with my heart and without them. Tension between, we have a second tension between involvement or not involvement in structures. In my experience with social entrepreneurs, quickly retire when structures are created. This ironically creates the situation where we allow the creation of structures to give permanence our idea, our institution, but we rebel against those structures. Sometimes social entrepreneurs get bored with the day-to-day. We prefer to think about innovation for the future. We ignore the present, which is really important. In the present, we need to release control to a structure that we created. It is for the future that we need to keep innovating. This is the new game that the social entrepreneur has to play. Institutionalize and allow control to be given to a structured organism so that we can move on the other challenges in the organization and not lose our creativity. That's why we find another tension. Tension number 3, tension between being inspirational and entrepreneurial. Two important features that founders provide to their organizations are unity and commitment. Both of them are intangible things. It is from this perspective that the concept of spirit and body of the organization gets validity. The spirit is the tangible things, entity, and the body is the organization structures. Social entrepreneurs need to infect each person that works alongside them with this spirit. However, translating the philosophy of the organization into tangible artifact is the unique work of the entrepreneur. But how do you decipher mystique and charisma of the organization? For example, in Unidos, a part of our philosophy is to try to eliminate the stereotypes that affect how disabled people are integrated into life. Even our logo applies this philosophy. We use a smile face, since the root of our philosophy is the creation of happiness. It is here where one talks of scaling. I base my thesis on this. If the mystique of the organization is not included in tangible elements, then scaling will not reproduce the philosophy. It will only be reproducing the structural elements of the organization without the soul, and perhaps limits the life of the idea. In this tension, the entrepreneur needs to wear two hats, knowing when to provide inspiration and when to move away and be creative. In summary, I have used a combination of epic and alignment leadership. I have involved others with an engineering style in key positions and moments to let Unidos adapt to changes and continue its growth toward the dream we share. To conclude, I want to look at some of the risks if ignoring these tensions. Number 1, a social entrepreneur could be judged as effective only for starting the idea and not just useful for developing and expanding it. Number 2, the inspirational role of the social entrepreneur and the mystical element of the organizations seems to be invisible, and such might not be taken seriously and given value. Number 3, if social entrepreneurs release complete control of their idea to a governing body, they will find themselves in an organization that is much different than their original idea. Number 4, when the social entrepreneur feels that only he is in tune with the dream, he doesn't understand that now his or her dream is a way of life of many more people. These people are able to spread more widely the initial idea. Dealing with this tension, bring me back to my original plan. I didn't just want to change an unfair world for my siblings. I wanted to create an enduring change for all. Thank you.
Estela, thank you very much. I think we're all very inspired by your work. And it's interesting to see that so far we've sort of, I think, built a clear proponent of everything is changing. In a sense, the everyone a change maker vision, that's the future. You were saying there's a combination of epic and enlightenment. And of course, I'm tempted to hear now from Sami. I'm sure Bill hasn't accused you or business in general of being a dinosaur. But, what about execution? What's the execution piece? So, Sami, I'm delighted to hear from you your perspective on how to catalyze effective leadership and addressing these tensions.
Well, thank you, Max, and buenos dias. Good morning. I bring greetings to all of you from my beautiful country of Colombia. It is really a privilege to be here in such a distinguished session, of course, with Bill and Max and Estela and Jillian, and it's quite an honor for me. As social entrepreneurs, we want to create organizations that have scale, that have a high impact in our communities, and we want these organizations to be sustainable. And this is what we're always after. Now, in Colombia, I look after an organization called Futbol con Corazon, which translates into soccer with a heart. And we go into these very poor communities where there is plenty of crime and violence, and use soccer to change the attitudes and the behavior of the young children and the adults. So this is basically what we try to do. We favor, of course, we understand that all forms of leadership that Max has described, epic and enlightenment and engineering leadership, are all present in all organizations, but we tend to favor engineering leadership. We favor these elements in engineering leadership: having focus, having professional management, having efficient operational processes, and having a very clear growth strategy. Now, let's return to each and every one of these. The first one is focus. We want to understand what is the uniqueness of the organization. What makes the organization have a real differentiating value? What makes the organization be dramatically different? What is the superior purpose of the organization? And the ultimate goal is to have that mission in 10 words or less, and it becomes very, very powerful motivating element. Secondly, this is our problem. In Colombia, we have millions of children. In fact, in other places in Latin America as well, and in other countries, like Pablo. Pablo has a lot of lack of mentors. He has too much free time on his hands. He's exposed to a lot of intrafamily violence. He does not have extracurricular activities or after-school programs. And then, with all this free time, he's exposed to drugs, to alcohol, to risky sexual behavior, to crime, to participating in gangs, and to having recruitment by the illegal forces in Colombia, both the paramilitary forces, which do recruitment in the less fortunate neighborhoods, and also from the guerrillas. They also do recruitment for illegal forces. So 85% of the crimes and the violence in Colombia comes from these neighborhoods, where Pablo and Maria and millions of kids are out there being exposed to these risks. So our mission is to bring soccer for peace to these troubled neighborhoods and change the attitudes, the behavior, and the values of these children and their families. And Soccer for Peace is a methodology that includes playing soccer, of course, but with different rules. In Soccer for Peace, boys and girls play together in the same team. In Soccer for Peace, the first goal of each team must be scored by a girl. Otherwise, it will not count. So we treat gender issues. In Soccer for Peace, the children and the young adults play without a referee. They learn from a young age to solve their own conflicts by themselves. In Soccer for Peace, the children have meetings before the game where they establish the rules of coexistence. How will they behave in the soccer field? And then, after the game is played, these children meet again and evaluate if their behavior was according to what was established in the meeting before the game. And at the end of the game, the winner of these Soccer for Peace games is not the team that scores the most goals, but a combination of goals scored and the application of these coexisting rules, which are based on the values of tolerance, solidarity, respect, and honesty. Now, the second element of this, what we call engineering leadership, or Max has instructed about engineering leadership, is creating a team. First, we have a corporate governance. We have a board of directors, which is second to none in a social organization. It's a board of directors composed of, imagine having a board of directors composed of Max, and Bill, and Estella, and Gillian. This is the type of board of directors we'd like to have. So we make a huge effort to have the right corporate governance, and you're all welcome to our board if you ever have the time. So we have the right corporate governance and with the professionalism that is needed to create this social enterprise. And then we have a team. But we make sure when we recruit our team that first they have empathy, as Bill has suggested, that every single member of our team has empathy, that they are committed, that they are disciplined, that they are accountable, that they are proactive, that they are enthusiastic, that they are organized, and they're willing to work together. And we find this to be a very important element, having the right people. I don't know if you all remember, this is Andrés Escobar. Andrés Escobar played the World Cup in 1994 in the game Colombia versus the US. And Andrés Escobar, a terrific young man, a real gentleman on the field and out of the field, he scored an own goal. So he scored a goal against his own team. And of course, we lost that game against the US. And we had to leave the championship because we were disqualified. And so the team came back to Colombia. And after coming back, a few days later, Andrés was assassinated. He was assassinated by the Colombian mafia. And so this sparked a look into soccer and football and see what we can do in terms of bringing in new ideas to look at soccer as an element to build communities, not to destroy communities. And this is when Soccer for Peace was invented. It was invented in the city of Medellin by two great individuals, Agustín Ortiz and Alejandro Arenas. And these two individuals created this Soccer for Peace, and they saved thousands of lives in these slums in Medellin by implementing Soccer for Peace, where the gangs played against each other in Soccer for Peace. Now, the third element is the processes. We've identified in Futbol con Corazon, in Soccer with a Heart, four processes that are very important. The first one is the building of the fields and the community centers, which we build in every single community where we establish our project. We also have very strict processes in implementing Soccer for Peace. Our instructors go through a process and a workshop where they are certified as instructors in Soccer for Peace. Then we have the workshops with the parents and with the children and the leadership clubs and everything that goes around in these very interesting workshops. And finally, we have nutrition. The nutrition we don't do directly. We outsource because we're focused on Soccer for Peace, and we have a special organization that does the nutrition and is our partner. So we spend a lot of time documenting these processes very well so we can later, as we are doing now, and as we scale the project, it's like a cookie cutter. Once you have these processes documented, and once you have these processes in place and the people that are trained, you can expand almost indefinitely. Now, the other element, the final element I have to present today is a strategy for growth. So this is based on three pillars. The first pillar is partnerships. We don't want a huge amount of partners, but we want very good partners. So, for example, we have partnered with Jacobs Foundation, a terrific foundation based in Switzerland. who is helping us scale the project. We have partnered with the Presidency of Colombia through their program for the illegal ex-combatants. And so we work very directly with the President of Colombia and his agencies. And also we've partnered with other organizations such as MBAs Without Borders. They send professionals to help us in evaluating our business plan and moving forward and identify any problems that may arise in some of these processes. Secondly, we engage in cross-subsidy program. We implement Soccer for Peace in high-income neighborhoods, and these children pay a fee for participating in Soccer for Peace. And then for every child in a high-income area that participates, we are able to finance 3 children in the low-income neighborhoods. And finally, we do massive fundraising. We have a Sponsor a Child program. We have programs for private companies, for small, medium, and large companies. So we do massive fundraising as well. Now, we certainly believe that the ideas are out there. There are plenty of ideas. There's a lot of creativity. But I personally favor taking these ideas and executing them properly, because a lot of ideas get lost in the middle because they are not executed properly. And if we favor engineering leadership without, and understanding that both epic and enlightenment leadership are also very important, if we favor these type of institutionalizations through right processes, through the right people, through the right corporate governments, through the right strategy for growth, through the impeccable and clear focus and mission, we're able to achieve this balance we've always wanted between creativity and control. Muchas gracias.
Sami, thank you very much. You know, I can see we're really setting the stage here for a debate, which is fantastic. And thanks for your, the inspiring work that you do. I lived in Colombia for a while, and I have to say it's extremely important what you're doing, and we're all very pleased and proud that you're doing this. I think there's one ingredient that we're missing in this debate still, and it falls upon Jillian, in a sense, to inject that. Because so far we've seen that, and there are probably slightly different views, but we've looked at challenges that are, in a sense, territorial in nature. I mean, in both cases, Estella and Sami, you have communities that have certain challenges and that one can deal with almost in a modular way. Now, the problem is many of the challenges that we face as a global community are deterritorial because they affect everyone, such as climate change, for example. So how do we play it there? I mean, when we work on really large-scale macro challenges that affect everyone, Jillian, please help us understand this.
So when my father asked me, why I was going to England, I said, Skoll World Forum on Social Entrepreneurship. And I said, presenting on a panel on creativity and control. He said, that's a good panel for you, particularly the control part. And I felt like saying, well, if that's not the pot calling the kettle black. And then I thought about my mother, who owned an art gallery, and I lived in the back of an art gallery as I grew up. And I thought, well, the apple didn't fall far from that tree either. And so as I thought about Max's design for leadership and Max's thoughts on it, I realized that I'm very much a hybrid of all 3 methods, and I think that there's a lot of strength in all of the elements. Epic leadership, inspirational, charismatic, empowered, vision, engineered leadership, which really is about designing effective systems and capacities, not just to implement vision and strategy, but also to ensure that that epic leadership is enabled to continue to innovate. And as Bill has suggested, enlightened leadership, because in fact we need an everyone a change maker world. We need to empower and enable an everyone a change maker world. So in fact, we have here represented 4 distinct perspectives on leadership, with mine I think being all 3 combined. Bill talking about enlightenment, you talking about engineering, and you picking 2 of the 3. It's quite interesting. as Max suggested, I'm what they call, a serial social entrepreneur. I'm on my third enterprise in 15 years. I was awarded the Skoll Award for the work I did with Witness, which empowers and enables human rights groups around the world to use video to create change and systemic social impact. And Witness's new executive director, Yvette, is here. Raise your hand, Yvette. So we'll talk a little bit about the transition because Max asked me to. And I'm now running a new national campaign in the United States called One Sky, which is a highly collaborative enlightenment model campaign to empower and enable a grassroots movement across the country to pass federal legislation in the United States to put a cap on global warming pollution and tackle what I think is the defining challenge of our generation, which is climate change. But I thought just a little bit first about what I've come to understand as the 6 really essential ingredients to success, the success of a project or a campaign or an organization. And I think they're the same essential elements. I mean, the first, as everybody's alluded to, is a very clear and compelling vision. That's absolutely critical. The second is a strategy and a plan. People talked about that as well. I mean, a vision without a strategy is a hallucination. The third is the team. Bill alluded to this. How do you build a powerful, enabled team of people, staff, board, advisors around you? Where is the talent? And I think this is the single greatest challenge that we face as social entrepreneurs, to identify that talent and to surround and enable it around us. The fourth, of course, is a system for evaluating your impact. If you don't have a way of understanding and measuring the progress you're making and reevaluating, and if you don't have a willingness to fail, I think you're not going to get where you need to go. So it's a process of continued evaluation and reevaluation with respect to your strategic imperatives. Particularly in the context of One Sky, we've moved to a rapid response mode in campaign deployment this year in the United States because we're literally deluged with congressional, regulatory, and activity at the administrative level. It is extremely busy when it comes to climate and energy policy in the U.S. after a long and deathly period of silence. And I mean that literally. The fifth element, I think, that's so critical is a deep emphasis on relationships. And Bill alluded to this, the importance of empathy. By relationships, I mean not just the internal relationships within an organization, but the relationships external. If you don't pay attention to nourishing and cultivating and building and sustaining relationships, you cannot succeed. And that is true at every level in your life. And so I think relationships are absolutely critical. And designing a system at an organizational level to empower and enable the development and the sustenance of those relationships is critical. And related to that is the outreach that you do. How do you communicate your vision, your strategy, your plan, and your opportunity for others to engage? Very connected to relationships. And finally, to go to my friend who loves engineering, a system for information management and institutional memory. You have to find a way to capture and manage and organize the information and the learning and the relationships and the opportunities that your organization is surfacing. And I think that's one of the most critical requirements for inspired leadership, and it's a place where a lot of so-called charismatic leaders tend to ignore that dimension. Where's the institutional memory? Where's the system for husbanding and coordinating that information and ensuring that it sustains itself as an organization? Extremely critical. So I mentioned 6. I didn't mention money. You'll notice, in my experience, if you have all of those things, the money follows. So I think that's a natural evolutionary result of those other elements. Max asked me to talk about engineering leadership to move on. And as you might guess, I believe that doing the 6 things I just mentioned is absolutely critical to laying the groundwork to be able to move on. So that's where I focused my energy, in all 6 of those areas, as I prepared, to move on and to pass the reins. There's a couple of other obvious infrastructural dimensions, of course. It was really important that I had a fantastic deputy director at Witness when I chose to leave, who was able to serve as an acting executive director during the period of the search. I wouldn't have left if it weren't for her. Couldn't have left. It's also critical, of course, to build, and Bill talked about this, a team. I had a senior team who had authority and autonomy and capacity in each of the key elements of the organization. I had built a strong financial base so that there was more than a year of operating support in the bank, and there were several renewal grants that were already in the pipeline. So, and I had been very clear with the donors that had supported our work that it wasn't about me, that it was about the team and the system and the web of relationships and the model that we had built. And I think they believed that, as was evidenced by the fact that several grants actually increased following my departure at the request and suggestion of my team. They were glad to see me go. Then, of course, having a strong board and staff, a committee to enable the transition was critical, and I think staff participation in that committee to identify the characteristics they were looking for in leadership and to help define and select new leadership was really important. After a global search, they wound up with Yvette, who was actually somebody I had recruited for the board. So they convinced themselves that she was indeed the best and only person for that job. And I think, the last and most important element to transitioning leadership is letting go. And that is something that I haven't written the book on yet. It's hard to do that. Max also asked me to talk about, a war story when it comes to creativity and control. And I thought I'd mention the Hub, which is a sort of a YouTube for human rights, which we developed at Witness just before I left. In fact, I finally got it off the ground literally the day before I walked out the door. And it was extremely challenging because it was basically a vision of how you can enable a platform like a YouTube for people to upload content of human rights violations from anywhere around the world and enable them to connect to a system of a community and advocacy-driven opportunities to make a change around that material. Raises lots of issues regarding veracity and security, a lot of complexity to the concept. But it was something that we cooked up, the board and I cooked up in conversation, which was very unusual for Witness. People talk about the problem that boards can control you. Every board that I've ever designed has been one that has empowered and enabled the leadership that we were building. And in fact, while they've approved the budget, I've never given them the opportunity to approve the plan, interestingly. I think that may be quite different than a lot of other boards, but I've provided the plan for input, and many of them have been involved in developing the plan, but the plan is an explanation of the budget. So they understand what they're investing in, and they have an opportunity to adjust and redefine it, but they don't write the plan and they don't officially approve the plan. So that may be a distinction and a way in which I've tried to carve out an opportunity for significant authority at the staff level, which is, I think, where a lot of the really deep comprehension resides. So anyway, in this case with the Hub, I came back to the team with absolute clarity that we had to do the Hub. I mean, we had talked about it at the board level. It was obviously, the time was now to move from a model where we were donating video cameras to human rights groups and empowering and enabling them to document violations to taking advantage of Web 2.0 and the global proliferation of cell phone cameras. It was so obvious to us. And I came back to the team with this is what we're going to do. And there was practically an uprising. Because of the complexity, because of our obligation to ensure the veracity and the credibility and the safety of the people we were working with. And so I had to step way back and talk about creativity and control. They didn't like this notion that, I would have come to some vision and agreement with the board and then brought it to them on a silver platter. And it all happened, super quickly. So I had to step way back and spend, the next 6 to 9 months in a process, a very involved process with the team, bringing in key outsiders and really examining the assumptions and coming up to a model and developing a degree of buy-in. So, that was for sure a war story, and it slowed things down. But in my opinion, if I had just shoved it down their throats, we wouldn't have gotten where we needed to go, which was to get it off the ground in a way that they felt, empowered and enabled by. I want to allow time for questions, and we're running super late. The only last question that Max asked me to tackle was, in this economy, more creativity or more control. And as per our speaker last night in the Sheldonian Theater, I choose neither. I believe that there will be both more creativity and more control in the context of this economic environment that we're in. More creativity because people have to think outside of the box, as they always have, about how they're going to bring the resources to bear to get the work done, whether it's more earned income revenue, whether it's deeper partnership, which I think is really important. And I hope that this enables deeper and better thinking about partnership. And more control in the sense that I think we have to be much more rigorous about how we spend our money. And the last thing I'm going to do just before I run, because we talk about Enlightenment leadership, is give you an actual example of One Sky and what we mean by Enlightenment leadership there. Basically, what we're doing with the campaign is we have 435 allied organizations. We have organizers in 20 states around the country. And we're empowering and enabling volunteer climate precinct captains in every congressional district in the country. And we're doing this through an online to offline organizing model, somewhat similar to what the Obama campaign designed. So basically, we launched this just in February. And we've already got all of these climate precinct captains in the last month, people who've raised their hand and said, I will be a volunteer organizer for this campaign. I will organize my community, I will educate my elected representatives, and I will work with you to get opinion editorials and letters to the editor into the media to help frame this debate in key congressional districts. So we have 47 states and 220 congressional districts organized through this online tool, which enables you a lot of opportunity to manage and organize your district, in essence. So that's all for me. Thanks.
Jillian, thank you very much. I think we're all extremely inspired. The challenge is exactly what you said. In addition to all the content pieces, how do we allow for discussion right now? We have 15 minutes. It's very simple. A question ends with a question mark, not with an exclamation mark. So we don't really want to hear, it's great if you talk about what your things, but ask, please, precise questions to our speakers. We'll do a round of 3 questions. We'll see if we can get through them. Obviously, the same adage also applies to all of us. You also have to be brief. And then maybe we can do a second round. If not, we have to do that then in the break outside. Who would like to get started? Yes.
Jill Violet, Sports for Kids. I can't help myself. Bill, when you say don't bring in the managers, can you, so my experience of going to scale is that several of my management team's hair caught on fire. And so we found it very important to bring in people with functional expertise around HR, management, IT. So are you opposed to managers who are sort of entrepreneurial managers, or just all managers in general?
Okay, well, that's a great question. We'll collect 2 more questions and we'll tackle it. Yes.
Since every organization starts with an idea, but then as many of you demonstrate, needs to become very clear, very solid, and very easy to explain. I'm curious about how each of you went from the network of interesting and enticing possibilities and really narrowed it down to that one thing that you then can galvanize an organization around.
Okay, good. Next question. Yes, we have one over there. Oh, okay.
I want your comment. I didn't hear much of how information modifies execution, control, inspires and sustains an organization, and at the end of the day gives you the results you want.
Thank you very much. I think we'll tackle this round. So 3 questions. 1, to Bill directly. Are you opposed to managers in general? Yes or no? I think it's more complicated than that. Second, I think the second question should be about focus. How do you move from a vast web of ideas and possibilities to focusing on one and then executing them? The third is really about the feedback loop. I mean, how do you make sure that as you learn more about what happens and what you do, that you adjust execution? I think, Bill, you probably have to start because that question seemed very urgent and burning. And then afterwards, I would suggest that we go through and you take them in the order that you'd like. Please.
When your hair is on fire, you have to do something about it, clearly. I just think it's much easier for entrepreneurs to learn to be managers than to try and get people who are not entrepreneurs, will never understand our type of organization, to fit in. And then you have a conflict. This is the marrying the dinosaurs problem. And so I'm not against management. 10 years at McKinsey, I promise you. I actually think it's really important. And of course you have to have systems. I didn't want to imply not at all. It's just, it's a different type of system. And in fact, one of the things that, going to your question, that you have to do is listen, systematically listen, and constantly be changing, not just the answers, but the supporting systems, the culture, the people. And it's just, if you are a mammal, if you really like change, you're good at this ballet, you have the ethical fiber, the empathy, the teamwork skills, then you can manage, you can learn the rest of it. If you don't have that, that's where the problem is.
Okay, I think that management is very important. I studied education, and then as a social entrepreneur, I need to study an MBA to know more about business. But I am convinced that we have to involve people with the expertise in business, in structures, in systematic, and you need to release control in that people, and you need to work in the inspirational arena. You need to fight with 2 hats, with the hat of expertise, manage, and the hat with inspirational, but to recognize which is our limits and to involve people with that expertise and to complement your skills. It is my opinion.
Well, there were 3 questions. On the management front, I'd agree with Bill that you want and need people with that kind of innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. But as I suggested, I think the single greatest challenge I've faced, and many of my peers have faced, is getting talent, getting the right talent. Finding people who are smart, strategic, creative, well-organized, and efficient. And I'm honestly less and less interested in management as I get more and more experienced with it. So I'm at the point where I'll manage people who are like that and no one else because it's too much of my time. It's exhausting, really. But at the same time, you can't have enabled team leadership if you don't trust the people surrounding you. So it's absolutely critical that you have people that have all of those capabilities and that you trust to innovate and to lead. I don't think you can do it at scale at any level without that. There was a question about information and how information informs change, and that's what I was talking about when I talked about the need for systematic evaluation. I mean, you need to be understanding your model and listening to and understanding its impact so that you can make mid-course corrections. And in situations where an element of the model is failing, you need to figure out why and fix it or ditch it. So I think that whole evolutionary dimension is really, really critical. And then there was this question about how you decide which idea. makes sense. And my feeling is that I didn't ever make any decisions. I mean, basically, I had to do what I found myself doing. There's a degree of gravitational force which brings me, to a particular moment in time and requires me to serve and to lead on that issue. And so if you look at my own trajectory from an undercover investigation on the Russian mafia to witness to climate change, you say, well, she's schizophrenic. I mean, what does she really care about? And the reality is that I see a particular opportunity at a particular moment in time to make a system-wide difference. And I enable a particular model and theory of change in whatever I do, which is about this enlightenment dimension. How do you empower and enable other people to make a difference through collaboration and partnership and through your campaign design? So those for me are the consistent narrative threads. And I think if you get too analytical about what it is that you want to do and why, you're missing, the passion, which is the lifeblood of the energy you bring to it.
Well, I agree with Jill. We need functional expertise, but in a way, I don't think there is a choice between functional expertise and change agents. I know many managers that are experts in their functions, and they're still change agents. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like last night, in the spirit of last night, is not really that much choices. We can have both. We can have change makers and experts at the same time. Now, in terms of deciding on the idea, I go back to William Murray's book, The Power of a Positive No, if some of you have read it. William Murray says that in life, one has to say no to good things to do what is your real fundamental yes. So when one is engaged in all these social entrepreneurship ideas and you have the fad of the day and people coming up with great ideas, it's important to be consistent with a vision. And you must say no sometimes to good ideas, just to be able to implement your own fundamental idea for change. And in terms of the question on how can we insist on engineering leadership when we need the passion, we need the inspiration, we need the vision, and also we need the enlightenment and the empowerment. What I believe, again, is not about choice. We must have all these types of leadership models inside organizations. They're all very helpful. But I have seen throughout the years that when good ideas are not accompanied by organized, systematic, methodological and sort of systems behind all these processes, many of these ideas that are good can fail. So this is why I favor the more scientific approach in terms of implementation, which guarantees a long-term positive effect on the social intervention in question.
Thank you very much. I think it's really amazing to see the passion in this room. It's almost sad that we don't have more time for discussion here, but the good news is, of course, everyone is still around. A break is about to follow. And I had to promise to the organizers that we would finish the session on time. And of course, we don't want to dishonor promises with our friends from the Skoll Foundation in particular. So I'd like to conclude simply by saying, for me, the three insights that I've gained, at least during this morning, and I'm sure we agree on those, is it's really amazing to see the power of passion, of creativity. Everyone here on this panel is driven. That's the starting point. That's why you managed to build the things that you have built. But over time, all of you have also managed to find ways to institutionalize some of this. I think Jillian spoke about it specifically or explicitly, but everyone has done that or is doing that. So in that sense, I think even though it's maybe less fashionable, the engineering perspective is a bit vindicated. And at the end of the day, I think if we think about leadership, I think we all agree, charisma, passion, that's very important, but we also need to get the structures right, and everyone needs to lead. So I think Bill's vision of everyone a change maker world, this is your direction we need to go. Probably here at the Skoll Forum, well, it's a bit of a no-brainer because everyone at the Skoll Forum is a change maker. But I think we need to ask all of us, ourselves, our friends, the people we interact with, how can we cascade that? How can we facilitate the emergence of such spaces in other environments as well, so that we truly arrive at such a context. So it is, in a sense, a bit about triple E leadership, I would say, if you want to put it that way. I would like to thank all of you. I'd like to thank the Skoll Foundation again for including this this aspect in the program. I know it's more of an abstract topic, but I feel we've had a great debate, and I personally feel I've learned a few things. I hope you feel the same. Thank you very much for joining. Please give a hand to our speakers.